But when I was invited to speak in this conference, they shared the agenda, and the topic I was supposed to speak about was women's rights and human rights, as you rightly said. And I said, I provided my comment, and I said, why don't you make it more comprehensive and speaking about the impact of the collapse of Afghanistan government over the past 4 years in Afghanistan. One of the major impact probably would be on lack of constitutional order or rule of law, which definitely impacts the situation of every citizen, especially women. So I provided my comment and I said I would like to speak about constitutional order and the impact of not having a constitution in Afghanistan on the country, on the woman, and on the human rights. So basically, I would like to start by stating, a little bit about the history of our constitutional order in Afghanistan, and then come to where we are now. I hope it doesn't become too boring, because I know history lessons, as much as they are very interesting, they're also very boring sometimes. So, you know that Afghanistan had the first kind of constitution. They used to call it Nizam-Name Asasi in 1923. Followed by a second constitution in 1964. In the constitution in 1964, although the form of government was still a monarchy, a democracy monarchy, but basic rights were given and granted for women and people. So, like the image you have in the global north about Afghanistan, and Professor Magnus also touched upon that, when you hear about Afghanistan, probably the first image is Afghanistan, suppressed people, a poor country, deprived of everything, not connected with the rest of the world, which is one image, and that has rather been created lately. Women with burqa or chadari, but the real image of Afghanistan is that the people in Afghanistan have always been pro-democracy, exercised democracy in their own way, and have been pro-women's rights in their own way. Of course, we have our cultural context, we have our own values, every society has, but we have always had some level of respect in our society for women. And in fact, maybe to the surprise of many of us in the global north, women in Afghanistan have started to have the right to vote before the women in Switzerland did. This is something that has never been highlighted. We had in our history, many people say 5,000 history, that we are very proud of that, but throughout our history we had women who led the country. And when they led the country, not only politics shifted differently, but our civilization in terms of business, in terms of trade, with the rest of the global community, really had a different shape. Yes, but it was the first time recognized in the modern history of Afghanistan in 1964 constitution that we had, that the rights were ensured for women. In the 2004 constitution, although there is a lot of discussion about it, controversies around different copies and versions of the constitution, I wasn't involved in that process personally, so I don't really know what the context of the process was. As far as I know, there were many issues that could have been better in the constitution, including our political system of the governance, including our national anthem. I believe the national anthem before this constitution was the most beautiful national anthem ever we had, not only in terms of the melody, but also in terms of the way it was sung. But that was changed. Probably many other things that not everybody in Afghanistan agreed, but few things that the people agreed in that constitution and therefore respected that constitution are important to highlight. One of that is equal rights of all citizens before the law. The Constitution of Afghanistan, Article 22, ensured, and I'm not even sure if I can say ensured or ensures, because that constitution is in limbo. We don't know whether it's a dissolved constitution or it's still a constitution that was adopted by the people, and there was no other process to substitute that constitution. So the constitution provided equal rights and opportunity before the law for every citizen. And when I say every citizen, means every citizen who lived in that geography, be it women, men, a different religious group, linguistic group, ethnic groups, different gender. The other thing that in that constitution probably most people liked, and maybe some people were not in approval of that, was the positive discrimination before the law for women, which we used to call it quota. So Article 64 of the Constitution provided 25% quota for women to be in the political offices, namely the parliament, the local councils, and the provincial council. Now, there is a global debate about the constitutional quota for women. I hope this will be the last time you guys disrupt my speech, because it's the second time. So in the Article 64 of the Constitution, it says 25% participation of women is legalized, even if the women get less vote. Although I have never been into the parliament based on the constitutional vote, I have always been elected directly. And in fact, Ms. Gilani, you have also been elected directly in the first time when this happened. But as I said, there is a global debate about the constitutional quota for women political participation, but in the countries where socio-economic access to specific gender or ethnic group or linguistic group is limited, the constitutional quota is important for people to have the same opportunity, the same space, access to the same resources before they meaningfully get to that point. So that was needed in Afghanistan, that positive discrimination or constitutional quota. As a result, we had 27% women in the parliament. Now, many people probably in the global north would assume that, well, Afghanistan was under the influence of the NATO. People use different terms. Some people say invasion of the NATO. There is a different perception of the NATO and international community military presence in Afghanistan. So many people think that, well, women had the freedom because of the gun and military presence of the international community. For those who were on the ground and basically faced the challenges, experienced the circumstance, we do not believe that only the presence of NATO or the support of international community provided the opportunity. We believe it was on the contrary. It was the people of Afghanistan who actually were in the forefront of fighting for democracy and equality and paved the way for NATO to come to Afghanistan. So therefore, women had really struggled a lot, although there was a constitutional quota, but it wasn't easy, even under that constitutional quota. The only difference was that we could speak. Everything else was not, I'm not saying comparing to the Taliban, the current era, but the only thing was freedom of speech, that we could speak freely. Everything else was basically controlled by the government. So it wasn't easy. But I think one of the differences of the current society in Afghanistan was the societal change that happened from the grassroots. Unlike the previous governments, where changes were imposed from the government level, from my experience in the past 20 years, change were actually, from kind of bottom-up approach. In the rural villages of Afghanistan, when I was traveling as a candidate, or as a social worker, or as a UN staff in different capacities, I was traveling, I could see how engaged the rural communities were in the political affairs and in the discourse of politics. I remember in 2009, for instance, when I went to one of the very, very remote areas in my province, and I discussed with the people. There was a group of women where we were discussing, politics and elections, etc., etc. One of the women who probably have never been to even Kabul, or hardly have used a car as a means of communication to go from one place to another. She told me, so Ms. Koofi, who is going to be the next president of the United States? Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama? And I was like, really? That was the level of information, because she followed the news and she was engaged. So the change was happening in the society level. So it was not only constitutional order, but constitutional order or legal protection provide that legal means for people to strive for that. However, when the changes happened, when the Taliban were brought to power, the opportunity was given to them to come to power. Now it's a different debate, of course. I don't want to talk about that here, but when times come, probably I'll talk about it. When the opportunity was given to Taliban to come to power, everything was erased. Now the question that might come to your mind is that, well, you said already the achievements were not because of the presence of NATO, not connected to that. It's true. But people were lost. There was no leadership. There was no genuine leadership that could lead people throughout this conflict process. So not only the absence of NATO or military presence of international community, but also the absence of a genuine leadership, which is, able to mobilize communities and use the transformed part of Afghanistan into a force. That was the reason that everything collapsed. So everything collapsed, and a full-fledged war against women and human rights started in Afghanistan. I don't need to tell you what is happening, because I'm sure most of you are already, in the picture. You have families, you follow social media, you have people on the ground. But many reports, including the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights, report the situation of Afghanistan, crimes against humanity, amounting to gender apartheid. So gender apartheid is something that in 21st century Afghanistan experienced, and I wonder if in any other society, if a group of religion or ethnic group or whoever is discriminated on the basis of that particularity that they have, which was not in their power to choose. I never had the chance to choose to be a woman or man, but I'm very proud of being a woman. So, but we are women, and we are being discriminated on that base, which has nothing to do with our religion. It is apartheid. And so, in 21st century, to see apartheid is happening in Afghanistan, and the rest of the world think it's okay because it's part of their culture. Afghanistan, we are so tired of it. I think the impact is going to be a more radicalized Afghanistan, and eventually a more radicalized world. Because you know that in the past 4 years, 15,000 madrasas have been established in Afghanistan. 15,000 madrasas. And they are not madrasas like I used to go when I was a child, or most of you used to go when you were a child. Nobody has an oversight of the curricula. No one knows what's happening in those classes. And especially, when women are being kind of trained in those madrasas, maybe a next generation of the population in Afghanistan will be Taliban women. And that is not even dangerous for our security. We have given up. It's going to be even dangerous for your security, I guess, for the global security. If you don't care about human rights, if you don't care about women's rights, today the foreign representative of EU said EU is at war. The one thing that you should care about as global North citizens is your own security. If you are in war with, Russia, you don't want the second chapter of war to start from Afghanistan. And this is going to happen sooner or later. So therefore, we must do everything to stop this. And stopping this is not simply influencing the Taliban. Because the UN for the past 4 years have tried to influence the Taliban. I have been engaged with the UN, including meeting Secretary General, Under Secretary Generals, you name it, every member state. And their approach towards Afghanistan was engagement to change the perspective of Taliban. After 4 years, since 3 days, the UN female staff who hold a passport or ID of Afghanistan are not allowed to enter the UN premises. So what does it tell us? Lessons learned. The more you give concession to the Taliban, the more you embolden them. And I'm not even saying that we all should put our hands together to fight Taliban, because you did that. And then all of a sudden you became friends with the Taliban. I mean you guys in Global North. From fight to friendship. In between something is missing. And that missing is to make them accountable based on the international order and to give a meaningful space for the people of Afghanistan. Meaningful space so that they could have an organic narrative for their own country. I stop here and I thank you.